Judith Butler describing the October 7th massacre as an armed resistance. Oh no, don't do it.
We can have different views about Hamas as a political party. We can have different views about...
oh no, this is going to be so sad for a reason I'm going to get into right after this, okay?
Armed resistance. But I think it is more honest and historically correct to say that the uprising of October 7th was an act of armed resistance. It is not a terrorist attack, and it's not an anti-Semitic attack. It was an attack against Israelis.
Occupiers.
And, I did not like that attack. I have gone public with this. I have gotten in trouble for saying it was, for me, anguishing. It was anguishing. It was terrible. However, I would be very foolish if I then decided that the only violence in the scene was the violence done to Israeli people. The violence done to Palestinians has been happening for decades. This was an uprising that comes from a state of subjugation and against a violent state apparatus. Okay, let us be clear. Now, you can be for or against armed resistance, you can be for or against Hamas, but let us at least call it armed resistance, and then we can have a debate about whether we think it's right or whether they did the right thing, whether a different strategy. But the problem is if you call it armed resistance, you are immediately thought to be in favor of armed resistance and in favor of that armed resistance and that tactic. It's like, well, actually, maybe not that tactic, and we can discuss armed resistance. It is an open debate.
Okay, never mind. I think sorry for the Zionists. I think I completely agree with her. I think that's an okay framing. I was going to be really disappointed because I read, I think we did this on stream. I read a full-on paper on her she wrote a thing on like self-defense, and she goes through a lot of the cases for violent self-defense, when it might be justified, when it might not be justified, like the moral cases for different types of collateral damage and everything. That I thought was a really interesting paper. We read this on stream. I think this is an okay. Because I think that you can, calling it like a terrorist attack, there's a lot of implications to that are not as closely associated with like armed resistance. And she is right that if we view it in the context of an armed resistance, it reframes the conversation in probably a more accurate way. But it doesn't necessarily make it right. It doesn't make the cause for war just. It doesn't make the conduct in war acceptable or legal. But it frames it probably in a bit more of an honest light. Destiny, you're on the rapist armed resistance train? No, but are you on the train that people don't get raped in war? Because if so, I've got like 10,000 years of human history that's going to super disappoint the fuck out of you. Is Hamas a terrorist organization? We're dipping really hard into the what is terrorism here. Like, are they a terrorist organization? I mean, they're designated as such. But I mean, it is a regional government. I mean, like, in every sense, in every de facto sense, Hamas is a regional government. They administer to the region. They run all of the healthcare services, the educational services. They do population level stuff. They distribute money. They hire people. So you can call them a terrorist group, and they might fit that. But I don't think terrorist group and government is necessarily exclusive, or mutually exclusive, depending upon how you define it, right? Destiny, how is it an armed resistance when the target was a festival and not infrastructure military? Okay, I I learned these two concepts, okay, and I'm going to drill these into your brains, all right? And because this helps me, it helped me start it a lot. I'm an international law cuck. I'm an international law cuck now, okay? I started off thinking international law was real. We did some reading, and I was like, this is all bullshit. But now I am fully on board, at least insofar as the law of armed conflict goes. International humanitarian law and law of armed conflict. These two, one is kind of a subset of the other. Now, other stuff like contract there, I don't know, I'm maybe fucking retarded. But this stuff I think is really important. It's really good to understand, and it gives you a really good guiding. It gives you a really good framework through which to like analyze or understand stuff. There's two principles. You're gonna get ready because you're about to hear me say this a billion times, and I've probably already said this a billion times on stream. Okay, there's two principles. One is jus ad bellum, and one is jus in bello. Okay, so Jus ad bellum is what are your justifiable causes for war? In the world today, you're not supposed to be the belligerent, the aggressor nation. You're not supposed to go to war with somebody. I shouldn't say belligerent, I'm sorry. You're not supposed to go to war with somebody for no reason. You can't do that, right? So when we're evaluating the jus ad bellum, the cause for war, I think, for a country, we're trying to figure out if a country has a righteous reason to go to war. So in Israel's case, on October 7th, I would say that there is a jus ad bellum there, that Israel has a cause for war. Hamas bombed them, and that's a good cause to go to war. However, all right, there is a fundamentally separate question of jus ad bellum, which is the cause for war, and jus in bello, which is the conduct in war. These two things are in totally different domains. So for instance, let's say that Israel gets bombed on October 7th, and on October 8th, Israel says, we're going to go to war with Hamas, and our form of war is going to be 100,000 9-inch Viagra up raping Jews. We're going to send them into the Gaza, we're going to rape everybody, okay? Now, in that sense, you would say that the jus ad bellum is justified. They're allowed to go to war against Hamas if Hamas attacked them. That's a totally justified reason to go to war. But the jus in bello, the conduct in war, is war crimes. That's not acceptable. But I think separating these two things out, I think is important because a terrorist group arguably never has a jus ad bellum. There's never a justification to do terrorism. That's insane. To go for a terrorist group to do anything. They're non-state entities. Non-state entities aren't even supposed to be attacking state entities. You're not supposed to do that. So, one, that would deprive Hamas of their right to attack ever, which I think that they should have a right. Hamas or the Palestinian Authority, whoever, should have a right to retaliate or attack if they feel it's necessary to justify the jus ad bellum part. But the jus in bello would be the way that they conducted their military operations, which involved the slaughtering of a ton of people at a festival, is not okay. That's unacceptable. Okay, yes. Why I say jus ad bellum and not casus belli? I think casus belli very specifically refers to like a cause, like a thing that you do that's a cause for war. So, like for instance, like me fucking your mom in the ass might be your casus belli to come and attack me. Jus ad bellum, I think, refers more broadly to the legal understanding of like what is a legally acceptable reason to go to war. Wait, so you're trolling or not? I don't understand. October 7th was it a terrorist attack? It's a 180-degree turn from your position a month ago. I mean, I would say that I just explained. If you don't understand what I just said, I don't know how else to explain it to you. Then your brain isn't on this level, and you can't operate outside of like good and bad, and I can't help you. So figure it out. Good luck. You'll get there. Do you think that's what she and everyone thinks when someone says armed resistance? I don't know, but she caveated appropriately. She did caveat appropriately, and she said, that doesn't mean that the armed resistance was good, right? So we can dissect this a little bit. Don't you think calling Hamas an armed resistance group gives weight and some clemency to the way they resisted on October 7th? No. You have to be able to separate these out. I don't care if the public can't do it. You guys need to be able to do it, though. I can do it. You can do it, okay? And I'll tell you to do it. I'll keep telling you to do it until you do it. You should be able to evaluate whether there is a just cause for war without mixing that up with the conduct in war. These are two completely separate things. These are two completely separate things, okay? So why is calling October 7th a terrorist attack wrong if you agree that they had not justification to attack civilians? Because the problem is when you frame something as terrorism, you've basically said that they have no right whatsoever to ever conduct war, that there could never be a valid casus belli, there could never be a valid jus ad bellum, there could never be a rational basis justification. I shouldn't say rational basis, that's the word. There could never be like a rational reason why Hamas want to go to war. Let's say theoretically, okay? Let's say 10 years passes, there's peace, blah, 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 blah. Let's say that Israel, for no reason, fires a missile into the Gaza Strip, Gaza City, and they blow up a building. And then let's say Hamas says, we're going to come out and we're going to blow up one of your, we're going to blow up one of your security camps or whatever, right? If we've identified Hamas as a terrorist organization, in a way, you've linguistically deprived them of the right to ever retaliate against Israel if Israel attacks them for no reason, or for a reason that might be considered illegitimate. That's not fair. I don't think it's a fair burden to place on them. I think Hamas ought to have a right, the people in Gaza ought to have a right to counterattack if they feel they've been unjustly attacked. Also, framing it as an armed resistance lets us have a more honest conversation about, okay, well, why might those citizens want to attack? And then we can say, well, I don't think there was, personally, I don't think there was a just cause for war on the 7th for Hamas. I don't think they had a good use ad bellum. I don't think they had a good reason to go to war with Israel. And I think their use in bello, for the most part, was deplorable. They killed a ton of civilians for no good reason. There are war crimes. There are international humanitarian laws that are violated. There are Geneva Convention protocols that are violated, including AP1, AP2. It's bad for a billion reasons, right? So the conduct in war and the cause of war were both bad, right? But at least if we call it an armed resistance, we can begin that analysis. If you call it a terrorist attack, you deprive yourself of even being able to think of it. Because when the a terrorist organization ever be justified in attacking anything? They're terrorists, right? That's what I'm saying. Terrorist is no different than apartheid. It's a buzzword. It's simply putting the conclusion of the premise. True. Yes, I agree. So October 7th wasn't a terrorist attack. I mean, like, oh God, we've stumbled into the nightmare of the word terrorist again. Don't tell Pisco. I really should never use this word ever. It's just a bad word. It just gets you into so much trouble. When I say terrorist, I'm using this just like a shorthand for like unjustified attack and blah, blah, blah. But it's the imprecision of the term and the fact that it lends credence to a lot of other dumb ideas means I should be more careful when I use it. Like, when I say like October 7th is a terrorist attack, I'm thinking like you're attacking a civilian population. In some sense, your goal is to literally incite terror. You don't have like militaristic aims or whatever. So like, it seems like a terrorist attack. I think on like a, what I say layman's or common parlance level, calling it a terrorist attack is like, I understand that. And I've said that. I'm pretty sure I've said that a million times. But like for like formal analysis of the conflict between the two parties, when you call somebody a terrorist, you've already presupposed every single military action they can take. Does that make sense? That's the problem. That's the issue. If I were to label a government a terrorist government, there is no justification for a terrorist government to do anything. But if you flip it, can you imagine, is it really fair to say that Hamas would have no justification for anything? Would we really deprive that entity from being able to respond ever? That can't be the case. That just can't be. It's not a fair analysis of that region. It's not fair to say that, right? We can imagine a world where Israel gets on the walls and they snipe and they kill, 300 Palestinians because they're bored. And then in Gaza, the governmenting body, I guess, or the organizing body, Hamas wants to retaliate. They should have a right to do that. They should have a right to retaliate in that sense. And they have to, because Israel has argued as such. And they have to be able to, because the only way, oh my God, the blocks, it's like Tetris, it's just all stuck in place. If you want to say that Hamas is a terrorist organization, and if you want to say that Hamas doesn't govern the Gaza Strip, they're not a government, then that means that the Gaza Strip is occupied territory. And if the Gaza Strip is occupied territory, and if Hamas isn't a governing body, that means that when we evaluate Israel's actions towards Gaza, we can no longer evaluate it under the context of international or domestic armed conflict. Now we have to evaluate it as policing powers. And if we evaluate it as policing powers, every single thing Israel has done has been illegal. Even most of the militant killings have been illegal. Because if we analyze it from a policing law point of view, this is, by the way, how the UN did their tricky analysis of the Great March of Return, where they said only 1 or 2 deaths were justified. The way that the UN was able to do that is they said, well, we were analyzing this as a policing conflict. No, it's not. That's just an armed conflict between 2 different groups. Why would you analyze it as policing? But if you want to say, well, they're a terrorist organization, they don't govern the region. Oh, okay. Well, if that's the case, then that means you occupy it, unless it's literally ungoverned. That means that you occupy it, and now I have to evaluate you as a police force. Police can't missile strike their own fucking population. Police can't roll in with tanks and snipers and machine guns and start killing their population. That's insane, right? So you can't have it both ways. And Israel doesn't want to be the police force. Israel wants to say it's no longer occupied. An argument that, by the way, I agree with, and I think it's a decent argument, that you wouldn't consider Israel the occupying power in the Gaza Strip for a bunch of other reasons that have to do with occupation and armed conflict and blah, blah, blah. But if that's the sense, if that's the case, then when we look at the Gaza Strip, yeah, Hamas would have theoretically justifications to go to war. Again, I don't think October 7th was justified, neither the cause for war nor the actual conduct in war. But yes, okay. Jesus. All right.